Yeah, the PPI data here is certainly stronger than expected, stronger than the Fed would like. But as you mentioned yesterday, the consumer price data, while still firm and still a bit sticky and elevated, did show some moderation. And I think that is really the key. And it gets back to the pass through, right? As Steve mentioned, companies may be paying higher input prices, but can they pass it on to consumers, and to what degree and for how long? So we'll have to wait and see. And in terms of the transmission, that was a great question earlier about the pass through from PPI to CPI. But I looked at the data. Actually, it's been moving in tandem month to month. So there's not much of a lead time from PPI to CPI. So I think we have to wait and see. But our view is we've probably reached the peak in inflation, but it's going to remain elevated and sticky.
All right, so transitory then is still in the cards, because that's what the Fed needs it to be for its credibility, certainly to be intact, but also for its policy mechanism to really be what it expects it to be.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that is the operative word, transitory, and how long is transitory. But there are evidence that the Fed is correct in that a lot of this is being generated by the reopening and broader reopening of the economy. And also we have these supply chain disruptions. If they gradually get worked out, that should take some pressure off of inflation. But again, it's still going to remain high and higher than we're used to. The last decade, we struggled to get inflation at 2%. Now it's probably going to remain above the 2% pace for the next couple of years at least.
When do you think the taper is going to happen? Is October almost a formality at this point? And the timeline being you get the speech in Jackson Hole, you have the meeting in September, and you actually start the taper in October?
Well, I think many of us thought that at the Jackson Hole symposium, they would announce the QE tapering, but maybe not commence until early next year. But then when they wrote in the meeting, the statement that, or Powell talked about, he said it would take several meetings for them to really decide the QE logistics, then it made it seem pushed out the time frame a little bit. So it may be that we get an announcement, a formal announcement at the September FOMC meeting. Remember, they'll have one more payroll report. And if you get another strong report, that would be 3 strong reports. And that should give them enough confidence to announce that the QE tapering. And with inflation remaining elevated, it does keep pressure on them to take another step.
How are you thinking about the idea of what Steve Leisman has characterized as a more fractious Fed, that you can absolutely hear the more hawkish tone that some have said, or at least that some have come across with this week, including Kaplan, who Steve interviewed personally yesterday, but there have been other Fed speakers, too, that would lead you to believe that maybe you have some fracture within the room, that maybe Powell, though he hasn't, he's led you to believe certainly that he's more dovish, nothing to make you believe otherwise, though some others have now been speaking out to the contrary.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a fracturing of the FOMC and moving out along the spectrum, the doves on one end and the hawks on the other. And I agree with you. I would put Powell more on the dovish side. I think that he and the core leaders, more towards the central of the spectrum. And I think what they're going to do is gradually, pivot towards less accommodation. And I do think it's quite valid. We'll get the announcement for QE tapering sometime in fall. And I think you get all of them to agree with that. Some want to do it quicker. Waller, Kaplan would like to go quicker. But I think announcing it in the fall, maybe even starting a little bit, earlier, maybe towards the end of the year. But remember, rate increases are further off, and there we think that doesn't occur until 2023, even though you have the splintering on the FOMC.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.